All right, good morning. Good morning, good morning. Welcome again to Community Church. My name is Tom Pryor. I'm one of the pastors here. We are continuing, or rather I should say we are finishing our series called Stories. Today's our final Sunday in the series. We've been taking a look at some of the stories that Jesus has told during his ministry time on earth. These stories are amazing. They're full of meaning, but what they often do, the reason why Jesus would tell these stories is he liked using them to flip kind of people's understanding of God on its head. He'd like to kind of surprise them with the endings and show them new and better things about who God is, what he's like, and what our lives look like in light of his goodness, and show a new way of living. And we've been spending a lot of time there, and I think today's story is going to be one of those stories that I hope will have a profound impact on you. The story itself and everything it means has had a profound impact on my life and countless lives over the last 2,000 years that people have been sharing this story. But before we go there, we need to talk about something. We need to talk about this, what it means to serve God, serving God. Now, immediately for a lot of us, something comes to mind. It's like one of those phrases where you have like a word picture of what serving God might look like. And over the course of, human history and throughout all the various religions, people have served God in many, many different ways. And it's looked different throughout the times, and some of the things still exist today. And some of them are really fantastic. There's people who have built monuments and temples to honor their God or their gods, to serve their God, maybe to hopefully receive some kind of blessing, maybe to keep them happy, maybe so that it doesn't rain so much that their crops get flooded away. Who knows why? But people do these things, right? There are people who have read and kept every law and commandment they have heard from their God or their gods, and they write them down and they try to live exactly to the letter of the law, doing all the right things and avoiding all the wrong things so that they can serve their God. There are people who have devoted their lives to a way of living that is foreign for many of us, like a monastic, monk-like life where they go away and they spend time away and they devote themselves to reading and praying and meditation. They shun, earthly, worldly pleasures to hopefully serve their God. Maybe to make him happy with them. Maybe to please them, that they might receive some blessing from them. And as you fast forward through time, things change, but people build churches and cathedrals and all sorts of ornate things to please their God, to provide places of worship so people can go in and perform rituals or sacrifices, sometimes human sacrifices, but in order to serve their God. And there are things that people have to do daily, multiple times a day, daily, weekly, annually, seasonally. And honestly, sometimes it starts to feel like a ton of work. I don't know if you've ever felt this way before, but sometimes serving God feels like you're working for God. That sometimes he's like this cosmic boss who's like always watching 24/7. He doesn't ever stop. He's like Santa Claus. He knows when you're naughty or nice, when you're doing the right things, you're talking to the right people the right way, you're avoiding this kind of behavior, you don't mess with that sin over there. And that exists today with people who follow Jesus, Christians, where we're like, I just need to get better at doing this. I feel like I'm letting God down. I feel like I'm not doing what I ought to do. I'm not loving people the right way. I'm not giving to the right charities. I'm not volunteering enough. I'm not reading my Bible enough. I'm not praying enough. And there's this list of all these required activities it feels like we're supposed to do. And it's not like life-giving. It becomes like burdensome. It feels like a lot. And you're like, yeah, that's why I want nothing to do with religion. I already got a boss, and I don't like him. I don't need another one who never sleeps. All right? And this is unfortunate because I don't think serving God or serving even his people should feel always like you're working for God. And it's tough, because some of us have had good bosses. You probably have a boss right now, or maybe you are the boss and they're talking about you. But people have good bosses, right? And you know that they care about you beyond just what you do for the business or the organization, right? That's a great feeling. There was a guy I worked for. He was a manager at a pizza place that I worked for years ago. I know this is the face you think of when you think pizza, but I worked there, and his name was Peter, or we called him Peter, but his real name was Pietro. He was from the old country, from Napoli. And he was an awesome guy. And like you could tell, he genuinely liked the people he worked with. So even after I finished my time there, I would like make sure I'd go say hi to him when I visited the place, because he was a nice guy. I could sense that it wasn't just about getting me to do my job. It was more than that. But for others of us, you've had tough bosses before. Maybe you have one right now where it's like, it's not so much that they're miserable all the time, because sometimes that's easy. Like you just know, like they're always in a bad mood. But it's like when you don't know where you stand with a person, that's hard. Everything could be going fine, and then you mess something up. It's like all of a sudden it feels like all the structures built just come tumbling down. Now they're mad at you personally. Maybe they're the owner of the business, and it feels like you've made a mistake or you did something maybe not perfect. Now all of a sudden you're affecting their bottom line personally, like you better watch out kind of thing. And that sentiment sometimes carries over to how we feel about God, that he's the boss. And maybe you feel like, yeah, he's a good boss, but maybe he's not a good boss. Maybe you're like, he's just watching for me to mess up so he can fire me, kick me out, mess things up. But either way, it feels like you're working for God, that you have to earn a paycheck. You have to earn his favor. You have to earn grace and mercy, kindness from him. But maybe you know the gospel. You know what's really on offer with Christianity. You're like, I've sat through church. I've heard messages before. I know it's in the Bible. I know that Jesus made it so that we don't have to earn anymore. Like, I understand that, he, even though we messed up and we've sinned and we've done things wrong, Jesus took all of that upon him, and then he died on the cross that we might be forgiven. And that debt that we owed God, Jesus took and wiped it away. But sometimes we fall into this pattern of living and behavior where it feels like, well, I know he wiped it away, but I sometimes wonder if he just like transferred it to him and he's a debt collector and now I owe Jesus. And I've heard at churches before, growing up, we're like you should get involved. You should do things for the church. Think about how much God has done for you. And you're like, they're leveraging guilt to get me to serve at the church. So it feels like, again, I'm working for God. And sometimes we slip into this unknowingly. And you're probably like, yeah, that's why I don't want anything to do with it. Stay away. Well, I think today's story, the one we're going to look at today, will address this idea, will provide some relief, some much-needed relief, as well as be life-giving, will be so helpful in understanding what it means to serve God. So that's what we're going to do. We're going to take a look at a story that we find in the Gospel of Matthew. Now, real quick, the Gospel of Matthew was put together by a guy named Matthew. That's how you name things. Just put your own name on it. No, so he was actually one of Jesus' closest followers. He was one of the original 12 disciples who once was a tax collector, like a shunned member of society, to becoming one of Jesus' followers. Like Jesus, like, I don't care about your past or your profession. You, come follow me. He's like, got it. And he followed Jesus, and then he wrote these things down. And what we're going to do is we're going to go through all of 1 through chapter 24. Just kidding. We're not going to do that. We don't have the time. We're going to go straight to chapter 25. Now, chapter 25 is towards the end of the Gospel of Matthew. So there's a lot that has occurred, okay? But we're towards the end, and Jesus is talking with his closest followers. He's talking with them, and he's sharing with them. He's sharing with them about the thing he talked about most often. And we're going to jump right in Matthew 25. And this is what it says. He begins, again, this is a story he's about to tell. Again, it will be like, which is a weird way to start a story with again and it. It's because he actually told something previously, like the paragraph or two before this. And he's talking about the kingdom of heaven, the kingdom of God. It's one of the topics, the things he talked about the most. Basically, he was trying to introduce this new way of living as if you were a member, a citizen of a king. Like you were under the ruling, the authority of King Jesus. He's like, this is what it's going to be like. And oftentimes the things he would say about the kingdom, they were not what people expected. It wasn't about power, but like submission. It wasn't about, fighting to obtain like the seat of authority, but rather to serve one another. So this is what he's doing with these stories. He says, again, the kingdom of heaven will be like a man going on a journey who called his servants and entrusted his wealth to them. To one he gave 5 bags of gold, to another 2, and to another 1 bag, and each according to his ability. Now, maybe you've heard this story before, and they use different terminology. In other translations, they might use the word talent in place of bags of gold. Talent doesn't mean ability, but rather a unit of currency in that day. In today's dollars, a talent could be worth somewhere between several $100,000 and almost $2 million. So this guy, he's wealthy, and he's giving some serious wealth to his servants to go manage, to go do something with it, because he's going on a long journey. The story continues. Then he, the man, went on his journey, and the man's servant, who had received 5 bags of gold, went at once and put his money to work. Took the money and started doing whatever it was he was supposed to do with this man's business. He took the incredible wealth, probably close to $10 million of today's money, and he put it to work, put it into the business, did something with it, and at once, he gained 5 bags more. Now, I don't know if you're an investor, if you like playing with the stock market, or if you like Bitcoin and crypto and things of that nature, but like getting a quick 100% return on an investment is outstanding. If you're an investor, you're like, that's what I want all the time. This guy did it very quickly, and the same thing happened with the guy that had 2 bags. He put it into the business and immediately received 2. But the man who had received 1 bag, he went off, dug a hole in the ground, and hid his master's money, and we'll find out why. It's an odd thing to do, it seems. After a long time, the master of those servants returned and settled accounts with them. He's like, I'm back. How'd you do? Tell me about what you did with this incredible wealth that I have given you. And it says this. The man who had received 5 bags of gold brought the other 5. Master, he said, in other words, Lord, right, the one in charge, you entrusted me with 5 bags of gold. See, I have gained another 5. I have no idea how heavy it was. I probably couldn't lift it, but like, here's the 10 bags. You gave me 5, it's doubled. Outstanding. The other guy, the man with 2 bags of gold, also came and said, Master, he said, you entrusted me with 2 bags of gold. See, I have gained 2 more. Each of these guys, 100% return on the investment. Not so bad. And the master, the Lord of this business, he's thrilled. He replied, well done, good and faithful servant. You have been faithful with a few things. I don't know if I would think of a couple $1 million as few. I could use some few things. I would like some few things. But he says, I will put you in charge of many things. Come and share your master's happiness. You killed it, man. You guys went out and you did the thing. You took what I gave to you and you ran with it, and you've produced a return. Let's go party together. Come and share your master's happiness. And then, next slide, the man who had received 1 bag of gold came. Now, if you were in Jesus' audience that day, you'd be like, oh, this guy's gonna get it. He is gonna get it. The master was thrilled with them. What's gonna happen with this guy? Like, you are on the edge of your seat trying to figure like, okay, what's gonna happen? So the man who had received the 1 bag of gold came and said, Master, he said, I knew that you are a hard man. I know you're a tough business guy. You're on a tight ship. You are ruthless when it comes to business. You harvest where you have not sown, and gather where you have not scattered seed. Now, I've read this story many times, and I always thought that he's basically saying, like, you go and steal from fields that you never bothered with. That's not what he's saying, and I've sadly only realized this recently. What he's saying is, like, you're a hard businessman. You know how to run an organization. You employ others to go do the work, and then they plant, they scatter the seed, they water it, they take care of the fields, and when it's time, there's a harvest, they reap, and you get the benefit. You celebrate what's happened. Like, I understand how your business works. Basically what he's really saying is, like, I'm scared of you, you're a hard man, and he's blaming the master, and then he says the following. So I was afraid. I was worried about what I was gonna do with this. What if I didn't do anything great? What if I lost it all? What if I made a mess of things? What if I couldn't perform the way I thought I was supposed to perform? What if I couldn't keep all of the lines clean? What if I couldn't make sure I did everything the way it was supposed to be done? This long list of required activities to earn the money. What if I could not do it? I was afraid. So I went out and I hid your gold in the ground. But see, here, you can take it back. Here is what belongs to you. And the story continues. And his master replied, no biggie, you're my favorite, so don't worry about it. That is not what he said. I wish that's what he said. That's not what he said. He said instead, you wicked, lazy servant. This word wicked there, it means evil, but not like in the kind of like evil as in like you're the worst human being that's ever lived. You murder people for sport. It's like you are no good. You didn't produce anything with what was given to you. You didn't make anything of this incredible wealth that I gave to you. You're no good and lazy. And then he goes on and says, you knew that I harvest where I've not sown and gather where I've not scattered. You know I'm a business guy. You know I know how all of this works. What you should have done, continuing, well then, you should have put my money on deposit with the banker so that when I returned, I would have at least received back some interest. You squandered the opportunity. And then here comes the results of this man's inaction. So take the bag of gold from him, talking to some other servants. Take the bag of gold from him and give it to the one who has 10 bags. For whoever has will be given more, and they will have an abundance. But whoever does not have, even what they have will be taken from them. Basically saying, like, if you're not going to do anything, it's not even worth giving it to you. So give me that. Give it to the guy who actually does something with the stuff he's given. You're going to be without, and he's going to have an abundance. And then comes the ultimate punishment after the humiliation here. And throw that worthless servant outside. Like, send him outside of my bounds. I don't even want anything to do with this guy anymore. Into the darkness, where there will be weeping and gnashing of teeth. And that's how the story ends. Like, period. The end. And if you're in Jesus' audience that you're thinking, oh my gosh, this rabbi dude is not as pleasant as he sounds. Like, this whole weeping and gnashing of teeth and being thrown at, what's supposed to be happening here, what this means is, like, the weeping is regret. It's sorrow. The guy is thrown out of this crew. Like, he can't make anything, he can't do anything to get back in. He's totally sad and upset, and he's gnashing his teeth means to grind your teeth because he's frustrated and angry for dropping the ball and having no way to get back in. And that's how Jesus chooses to end the story. And you're like, whoa. If you were there when he told the story, immediately you would go to your own religious activities and think, is Jesus the master in the story? Is he talking about me? Maybe. And we've talked about this story before. We did a series last year called Influencers, where we talked about different people throughout history who've had a profound impact on the world. And one of them was a woman named Susanna Wesley. She's not very well known, but she had several children, but 2 children were very well known to the world, John and Charles Wesley. Now, when they were little, 5 and 7, her husband was an itinerant minister and would go places and basically leave her home with all the kids to raise. And she wrote him a letter once saying, I'm going to look at my life and what God has given to me, specifically these children, as bags of gold. And she used the word talents, as talents handed to me by the Lord. And I'm going to raise them as if they were a gift given to me. And the conclusion that we came to, reading this parable, this story of Jesus, then we're talking about Susanna Wesley, is the same thing we should all come to at the end of the story, which is this. What will you do with what has been given to you? And that is a very fair and still true question. But it does bring up some things like, okay, what's going to happen if I mess up? And we're going to get to that. So don't think that Jesus is like the bad guy here and he's going to be like, get out, all of you, you're all fired, I'm a mean boss. That's not what he's saying. But there is a there's a legitimate thing here. Like, what will you do with what has been given to you? And if you think about it, perhaps your life itself is a gift from God to you, and he's asked you to manage it, to do something with it. Perhaps it's the forgiveness that you feel. You know that you haven't even lived up to your own standards, let alone God's, and that bothers you. But there's grace and there's mercy on offer from Jesus, and you've received that. Well, now that you've received it, what will you do with it? Maybe you are a great business person and you've got loads of cash, and sometimes you feel like I'm supposed to do something with it. You're supposed to steward it, manage it, do something with it. And those are all good and true and beautiful things. But if we're not careful, when we think about this question, we can fall right into the same thinking we started this off with and feel like we are still just simply working for God. We're just more extra motivated because we're afraid we're going to be kicked out into the darkness where there'll be weeping and gnashing of teeth. It's the same idea. If we're not careful, we still feel like, oh, I just got to do better with what I've been given. I just got to do more. And it's not the doing that's the problem. It's the motivation behind the doing. You see, we get hyper-fixated on the guy with the one talent, the one bag, who was like, I did nothing with it. I squandered the opportunity. But pay attention to the guys that had the 2 and the 5. Look at what the master in the story says. He says this: well done, good and faithful servant. You have been faithful with a few things. I will put you in charge of many things. And then here is like such a profound sentence. He says, come and share your master's happiness. In other translation, it says, enter into the joy of your master. As in, like, you're not just a hired gun. You're just not a hired hand, a day laborer who's been given a few bucks to do some work and then you're off. Or you're a great employee. Here's a little bonus. Buy something nice for yourself. It's like, no. You are in with me. Share in what we have done together. This is not simply, I'm the owner, you're the employee. We are partners in this venture. We're working together in this thing. It's not simply working for God. That's not what this is about. It's a whole change in the way we look at this. It's working with God. And you've probably felt the difference between working for someone and working with someone before, even if they were the boss and they were the owner. You know what it's like when you have to just work for somebody, right? You know you have to respect their position. It's a whole other thing when you work with that person and they shoulder the weight together. They're on mission or whatever it is with you. And that is what Jesus is saying here. He's like, we get to do this together. At the end of this book, in Matthew 28, the last chapter of the book, Jesus says, like, go. He's telling his closest followers, go into all of the world. Tell them to obey all the commands that I've given you. Baptize them in the name of the Father, the Son, and the Holy Spirit. And he says, and I will be with you to the very end of the age. Like, we're in this together. It's a partnership. You co-own the mission. If that sounds crazy, you have to check out what Jesus said to his closest followers in the Gospel of John. Right before he's sent to the cross, he's trying to comfort them and give them a grand perspective on the whole thing. And he says this. He says, my command is this. Like, if you remember anything from my time with you, here's what you are supposed to do. Love each other as I have loved you. That's better than the golden rule. That's like the diamond rule. Don't love each other how you want to be loved. Don't treat each other the way you want to be treated. Go beyond that. Treat each other the way I have treated you. And then he says, greater love has no one than this, to lay down one's life for one's servants? No, one's friends. And he's predicting his own death here. And then he continues and says, you are my friends if you do what I command, which again, still sounds like you got to work for God, but he's talking about loving one another. Care for one another the way I care for you. I no longer call you servants, because a servant does not know his master's business. He's like, you've been looking at this the wrong way. You've been feeling like you've got to just check off all the boxes, do all the right things, stay away from the wrong things, treat people the way I've told you because you're supposed to, and you should be grateful that you even have this job. He's like, no, you don't get it. We're in this together. I'm entrusting you with all of this wealth. You get to carry this out forever. And for 2,000 years, it's been happening. It's a total shift in our understanding. It's not working for, but it's working with God. And there's shared joy from shared responsibility. And if you need help in this area, if you're feeling like, no, I hear you, but I'm not sure if that's accurate, or two, like I don't feel that. I still feel like he's the sky boss and he's watching and I have all these things to do. Here's what I would suggest. One, and this, I swear this is not a recruitment thing. This was not the point, but I do think it would help if you joined one of our teams. Okay. Got him. I'm serious. I would welcome you to talk to people who've been on our team for a while. You can watch the men and women who are on my teams. I'd like the production team who are in the back there, the band up here. Like, I'm in charge, but they don't let me feel in charge, number one, I should say that. But more than that, there is shared responsibility. There is co-ownership with the members of the production team and the band. Yeah, I'm paid to be here, and they're not. They're volunteers, but they just own it. And when there's victories, when there's success, we celebrate it together. Not like, thank you for making me look good, feels so great. But rather, we did this together. Like, there's a story of in July 14, when we did the baptism thing at the beach last month, there was a couple who signed up to get baptized, and they had never stepped foot in the building. They live on the island, but they've been watching for 18 months online. Like, the people who are running cameras and running audio and clicking slides and doing all of those things, and the band, like, every person had a part to play in them saying, you know what, I want to get baptized. I want to declare to myself and to the world, I'm on Team Jesus. They had a hand in that, and we get to share the joy that comes with that because there was a shared responsibility. Furthermore, if you're still not sure, and that's fine, the story ends pretty dark. Cast him out into darkness, gnashing of teeth, weeping. And people walked away from Jesus that day probably going like, oh man, I got to pull it together. I don't want to be the one bad guy who just buries all the good that God has given me. I don't want to be the one to be told like I'm out. They were expecting Jesus to be like, that's what's going to happen to you. But then a few days after he told the story, rather than the religious leaders and the people in that community who were dropping the ball, being sent out of the city, Jesus himself willingly was crucified on a cross outside the city on their behalf. That's the master we get to serve. That's the Jesus, that's the Lord that's in charge of the whole outfit. Not one who's going to be like, oh, you messed up, out. You're fired, get your stuff, pack a box, you're gone. But rather, I'll go on your behalf so you have an infinite number of second chances. That's the Jesus we serve. So if you're not sure, I want you to ponder that this week and think about how far he went so that you and I are invited in, not just to do work for God, not to just serve him, but to experience shared joy from shared responsibility.